So, welcome everyone to this special Faith for the Climate webinar that celebrates both A Million Acts of Hope, which has been happening this past week in May, and which also celebrates the diversity of Buddhist perspectives within Faith for the Climate on Buddhism and climate justice. We've timed this so that it is sometime before Wesak, which commemorates the birth and for some the death and enlightenment of the Buddha, which effectively ushers in Buddhist Action Month in June. And as part of um, A Million Acts of Hope, I'd like to read out a special reflection that we wrote at Faith for the Climate, specifically for the faith groups that are involved in A Million Acts of Hope. And let me just find it. I've also recorded it on our Instagram page, and Giles will put the link to that in the chat. So please feel free to share it. But I thought I'd read it out today as well as an introduction. So we give thanks for and honor the many acts of hope which happen in our places of worship, our sacred spaces, and our communities every day, every week, every month, every year. For the coffee mornings, litter picks, community gardening projects, the warm welcome spaces, food bank donations, language classes for refugees and migrants, the clothing swaps, the meals cooked for those who are hungry. We give thanks for and honor the hopefuls, those who show up for others day in, day out. We see our faith reflected every time hope is turned into action through these small but wonderful gifts. In the hope that springs from deep within our hearts, let us be recognized by our kindness towards ourselves and all beings. And we recognize that all faith traditions have often failed in reality to live up to their ideals, and through these distortions have contributed to division, exploitation, inequality, and violence. We strive to reconnect with our true purpose, to treat people and planet with kindness, justice, mercy, and compassion and wisdom. May our hope and compassion always sound louder than voices of hate and division. We draw from the sacred wisdom that counsels humility, repentance, grace, peace, and loving kindness. Now, this is the last you'll hear from me for a good chunk of this workshop because I'm very pleased now to hand over to your host and facilitator for today, our wonderful friend Olivia Fuchs. Now, Olivia has been practicing Buddhism since 1988. In 2017, she completed an MA in Reconciliation and Peace Building at Winchester University. And in 2019, she became a research fellow at the Center for Applied Buddhism, where she has helped convene two conferences, Buddhism and Conflict Transformation and Global Citizenship Education. And she is the project coordinator of the Dharma Network. And she'll be telling us a bit about the Dharma Network and Buddhist Action Month, and she'll be introducing the speakers for today. So, Olivia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Shannon, and thank you so much, Giles, as well, for organising and hosting this webinar. And also a huge thank you for facilitating the setting up of the Dharma Network, which is very much part of Faith for the Climate, and supporting us throughout the first few years of our inception. Thank you also so much for including us in the larger multi-faith community with all its campaigns, events and discussions. You know, we're a small network, so it's brilliant to be part of the bigger picture. So the Dharma Network is an intra-Buddhist network. So we have a lot of different traditions, part of our network, which was set up in 2019 with the aim to expand the number of Buddhists engaged in the climate and biodiversity conversation, to resource Buddhists already involved in climate activism, and to strengthen our relationships and community, as well as support and influence transformative policy and conversations, for example, in the run-up to COP26. We've held many online webinars and also smaller online spaces where people can share and support each other, and I can see there are quite a few people here who've been part of that. We've hosted in-person events and workshops in London, as well as panel discussions in Glasgow during COP26. We're part of the Network of Buddhist Organizations, or NBO for short, and every June we support Buddhist Action Month, which is BAM, we call BAM. So just a little bit more about BAM. Buddhist Action Month, or BAM, was set up by the Network of Buddhist Organizations in 2012, and it takes place in June each year. The themes change every year, but they're always there to inspire social engagement, hopefully throughout the year, not just for 1 month. Over the last few years, the themes have been nature and climate related, and we've developed a BAM handbook that people can use as a resource. This year's theme is A Planet in Crisis, the Gifts of Buddhism. The theme is meant as an impulse to explore our Buddhist practice in relation to the planet. What can we give through our practice and actions, and how can we more deeply appreciate what the planet gives to us? In fact, it's based on the Buddhist principle of dependent origination, or interconnection, or also called interbeing, which explains that we are part of this beautiful interconnected web of life of planet Earth, that we live within her and not on her or separate from her. So we're going to use the theme as a starting point for today's discussion, with the added questions which we can all ponder. So what gives you hope in relation to this year's theme, which I'll remind you is a planet in crisis, the gifts of Buddhism, but it could also be the gifts of something else. What practical action do you take and might you recommend taking? And how can Buddhist perspectives enrich interfaith collaboration on climate justice? So enough from me. I'm going to now introduce our first speaker, the Venerable Drolma. Venerable Drolma has been Executive Director of the Jamyang Buddhist Centre in London since 2019. Jamyang, London, is where she first met Buddhism when in her 20s. So offering service there has been like coming home. Before London, Venerable Drolma was Executive Director of the Vajrapani Institute, a foundation for the preservation of the Mahayana Tradition Retreat Center in California, USA, where she spent 14 years. Through offering service, she's delighted to support the vision of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and former Jamyang London Spiritual Director, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So, over to you, Venerable Drolma. What gives you hope in relation to this year's Buddhist Action Month theme, and what practical action do you take and might you recommend taking? Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you so much. Greetings, everyone. Really happy to be here. And what gives me hope? I mean, what gives me hope is our conversations like we're having today, and coming together and hearing about everyone else's enthusiasm, initiatives, and so forth. There's so much energy that comes from that. So I'll share a little bit about, what we're doing within our own kind of like microcosm of Jamyang London, because again, it's when we share what everyone else is doing that we see a bigger picture emerging. And we love the what you shared, Shannon, about the million acts of hope, because it is this network of goodness that is there and often invisible. And so that also, when we can make it visible, like the million acts of hope, then a lot of positive energy and enthusiasm comes. So I'll just share my screen just for a moment. There we go. Hold on. There we go. Can people see that? So
Perfect.
we at Jamyang London, of course, this conversation has been going on for many, many years. And on the call today, I saw Andy, and of course we've got Freddie that's part of the team. There's a number of people on the call who've been actively a part of the conversation within our organization. And maybe I'll share, just in a few years ago, back in 2024, we actually organized a European-wide conversation. And this was a conversation for leaders, we're part of a worldwide organization, and we have a number of centers throughout Europe. And we wanted to bring the leaders within the organizations together to have a conversation of how we were going to lean in more directly into the conversation, and what is it, what the gifts of Buddhism, what is it that we could best offer in our community within this topic of the planetary, the polycrisis. And so that was a very important moment, because once we all got together, and it was the first time we'd ever, as an organization, brought leaders within the organization to have this conversation. So it was really, really significant, and a great, great boost of confidence. And like we echoed earlier in this call, we realized there was just already a lot going on within our regional centers, and it just kind of made it, more visible and connected us together. So last year we had our second Planetary Crisis Summit, and this was organized by our sister center in Amsterdam. And this time it was inviting our communities into the conversation, the members of our communities. And so we had 6 European centers participating, including Jamyang London. And this is an amazing way to start actually build awareness as a global family of people just basically engaging in the conversation. And this year, our sister center in France, Nalanda Monastery, is taking up the baton and is organized a summit. So again, Jamyang London will be participating, Amsterdam will be participating, and other FPMT centers. And it's basically just creating fields of conversation, creating opportunities where the decision makers within these communities and the community members can come together and just, how to say, engage around a particular theme and talk about the teaching through the lens of a particular theme. Ooh. Ooh. Hold on. Hold on a second. I'm trying to. There we go. After the summit, we came together as a community, and it took us a while. We had a lot of really, really important conversation internally, and I imagine that similar things have or are happening within other spiritual communities around the world, which is a thoughtful process around what are the principles that are guiding us specifically as a community. Each community has similarities and then unique points. So we had really rich conversations as a community around what are the guiding principles that are unique to us that we feel should be guiding us into environmental safeguarding. And I won't go through all of them, because I think they're definitely what you would expect of a Buddhist organization. But I'll touch on a few points. The first one, slowing down and allowing space, and I'll expand on that afterwards, but is really the foundation upon which these other principles are based upon. The second of looking more deeply so that we can notice the interdependencies, and of course stop and notice the impact of our consumption, the impact of our action. Embracing simplicity, which again, as we know, and I know this audience of spiritual practitioners of different traditions, embracing simplicity in the conversation is not something that comes up often enough. But just developing our capacity to live in simplicity and to focus more on needs rather than on wants. the fourth one around compassion, and the fifth one around learning from each other, which again, we felt was just really important. So gatherings like today and just coming together and sharing what we're learning. So for example, at the moment, we're working on developing our procurement policy. And one of our guiding templates is from a Christian organization. So again, these are the kinds of things that we can really share and learn from each other. I talked a little bit about, slowing down and allowing space. So this is a conversation that has come up more and more. And of course, as a Buddhist organization, this is shared with other organizations, and we all know and experience maybe in our own lives the challenge of the attention crisis. When we started having conversation internally about slowing down and allowing space, and it may seem, counterintuitive, but it's really hard to do. And it's really hard for us to do as an organization. So there's this great quote that we love from Venerable Master Ricard, who playfully said, if Buddha was born at the time of Twitter, he might have never left the palace. And then imagine what could have happened. But this quote that's there from John Haidt, and I imagine a number of people may be familiar with John Haidt. He published The Anxious Generation that came out a few years ago and had a deep impact and helped shape legislation around teenagers and use of social media, and government taking very proactive action, such as in Australia and in other places. And so a few months ago, he said, attention fragmentation has now overtaken mental illness as the primary threat to human development and civic life. And we may have lost between 10 and 50% of our collective attentional capacity. So this is something that more and more we feel we can really contribute to that conversation. And so we're hoping to organize, a symposium maybe later this year or early the next year, but really just being more proactive in that conversation of raising awareness and the connection between attention and action. And so there's many other, activities that we're doing. And so I'll just share, just in the spirit of the Million Act of Hope, but we organize climate cafes every other month, which is an initiative from, which hasn't been started by us, the Climate Psychology Alliance. And I imagine that other organizations and other people on this call may have either attended or organized climate cafe. They're wonderful initiatives. And we're
Venerable Drolma, may I interrupt a little bit? And
yes.
Is it all right to come to an end just because we have...
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Olivia. I think that's really all I wanted to share. And so, yeah, maybe this emphasis on attention, building attention into this conversation. Thank
Wonderful.
you. And sorry for overrunning.
No, not at all. Thank you so much. So interesting. We could listen to you all day. Would you mind unsharing your screen as well? That would be fantastic.
Can you still see my screen? I think I may have unshared it. Can you still?
Yes, you've unshared it. Thank you.
Okay, I suddenly disappeared. Apologies. So I'd like to now hand over to the next speaker, who's Joe Mishan. Joe is a psychotherapist and a meditator in the Insight meditation tradition. He co-developed the London branch of Dharma Action Network for Climate Engagement, which later became Exile Buddhists. He's a member of the Eco-Dharma core group and has recently moved to Bristol, where there is a protest event every weekend. So Joe, over to you. If you could share what gives you hope in relation to this year's BAM theme, and what practical action do you take and might you recommend?
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. And I'm sorry to say that my internet is a little unstable. So if I suddenly disappear, just be prepared. Yes, and I'm sorry I missed a lot of Venerable Drolma's talk because I just dropped out for a while. Anyway, okay, so I think. I was thinking about how to present today, and I thought, well, they do say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and since 1,000 words would take more than my allotted 5 minutes, I thought I would show some photos, which would be a more sort of economical use of my time. So I'm going to show some photos in a minute, but before I do, just a moment to say that I'm framing hope in this context is the way that Joanna Macy uses the phrase active hope, which means not simply hoping for the best, but sort of acting in a way which is in line with an intention to do good. So it's in this spirit that I'm going to show these photos. There's just a few I'm going to show from Extinction Rebellion actions throughout the years, and not in any particular order. Many of them are outside Barclays, because that happens to be the place that we've been doing a lot of actions recently. And then I'll say a few things about the theme today. So hopefully the text's going to work. As the photos come up, just invite you to sit back and sort of just be aware of whatever arises. Okay, so here we go, and hope for the best. Let's hope this thing actually works. Yep. Try to stop in the beginning. So, Olivia, does that look okay?
No, it's we're having a. Yeah, now it's come up, and you just need to make it full screen. Thank you.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, that is full screen, pretty much. But you can see the photo, can you?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, right. Okay. So I'm not going to give any commentary really on this. I'll just roll through. Okay. So, yeah. So I think it was the Buddhist teacher David Loy, who's the author of a rather wonderful book called Eco-Dharma, who was quoting one of his colleagues who said something like, practice, practice. You Buddhists go on about practice. What I want to know is, when's the performance? So although I definitely wouldn't want to describe what I've just shown you as a performance, because that would sort of cheapen it, I think there is an element of demonstration in it, or perhaps a better word would be portrayal. of a different way of being, which is, I think, to a degree particular to Buddhism. So I'd be interested in your responses, but I find those photos moving. I think because they express a way of being which is precious and rare in our culture. So what those photos I showed expressed for me are qualities of rootedness, connection with ground, determination, peacefulness or contemplation, and something we might call pause or slowing down. So I would wonder how often you see these qualities held or expressed in our everyday life, particularly perhaps in an urban setting where we do most of our actions. And of course, these qualities of peacefulness and determination and contemplation are particularly rare in protests, in which someone or something is usually being resisted or opposed. So in our way of being here, we portray a way of being which is different from, and I would say, a challenge to cultural norms. And I think this is where the hope is. Hope that difference in opinion or allegiance don't have to be expressed in verbal or physical violence, but instead through embodiment of fierce compassion, in which something precious is being protected or stood up for, rather than something being opposed or someone being accused. So I think that's quite an important distinction I would make, is the difference between standing up for something, protecting something precious as a protest, you might say, which is, I think, the embodiment of fierce compassion, rather than accusing or finger pointing, which is quite common in protests and quite common in any conflict. There's also hope that we can inhabit a way of being that's not ruled by the demands of a culture that worships speed, acquisition, control, and power. So I think in our modern world, we inhabit what Zen teacher Pamela Weiss calls the horizontal dimension, in which we skate across the surface of our world. So we get caught by surface appearance. We focus on surface, we focus on fashion, soundbite, and this becomes more important, has become more important than truth, meaning, and depth. So meaning and depth are elements in what Pamela Weiss calls the vertical dimension, which allows contact with earth, or with soul, you might say.
Joe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello.
Will you start to?
Yes, I've got about literally a minute left. 1 minute left. So it's this shift towards strength expressed through compassion, which protects what is vulnerable instead of through violence, and a shift into a slower, more connected way of life that's essential if we are to diffuse the incessant conflict, divisiveness, and ecological destruction that so dominates our world today. Okay, so I think, just to say finally, that these qualities that Buddhism expresses, and in entering the public sphere in the way we are, the way we do, we offer a gift, we offer hope to our world. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe, and I'm so sorry to be the person with the watch, but thank you. That was so moving, and the photos are really moving and very telling. So I'm going to now hand over to our third speaker. Rehena Harilall, PhD, is a South African-born lay Buddhist teacher in the Plum village tradition and founder of Buddhists Across Traditions. She's been shaped by apartheid South Africa, African and Indian ancestral wisdom, and a lifelong commitment to healing and justice. And her engaged Buddhist work brings practice into peace building, climate justice, interfaith action, and community repair. She's organised national peace walks and international vigils, supports the development of a mindfulness centre in Palestine, and mentors climate justice and community building initiatives in South Africa. So over to you, Rehena, and maybe you'd also like to talk a little bit about the third question, which is how can Buddhist perspectives enrich interfaith collaboration on climate justice? Thank you.
Rehena, bowing in. Good afternoon, dear friends. Before I begin, I want to pause and acknowledge and have us acknowledge the earth beneath our feet, the air that we are breathing, the ancestors in our bodies, and the many, many beings who make this moment possible, whose lives are integrally bound up in ours. So let's acknowledge that. I also want to thank the speakers before me and to thank Faith for the Climate for inviting me into this space. I'm also especially grateful to see a vision I helped seed for a multi-faith climate summit carried forward and brought into being with such care. It reminds me that hope, like seeds, grows through many hands, many hearts, and many conditions. So when I hear this theme, a planet in crisis, the gifts of Buddhism, I don't hear a call to showcase Buddhist achievements. I hear a deeper invitation. What can our practice actually offer to a burning world? And while I speak from the Plum village tradition, I also speak from someone who's been nourished by Buddhist practices across different traditions, including the Tibetan with Venerable Drolma and with Joe through XR Buddhists. But I'm nourished not only by the Buddhist practices, but by our interfaith friendship and by communities who continue to connect in the face of the polycrisis. So for me, Buddhism is not an identity. It is a practice of how we live, test, and embody the ethics in our world. Venerable Drolma mentioned earlier that one of the gifts of Buddhism is cultivating the capacity not to turn away. And this climate crisis can feel overwhelming, but it's not only an environmental crisis. It is bound up with war, poverty, racism, displacement, extraction, and spiritual disconnection. So the mindset that consumes the earth also devalues human life. So for me, climate justice cannot be separated from justice between people, from peace, or from repairing the wounds of our history. My own path into this understanding begins with ancestry. I come from both Indian and African lineages, marked by the history of slavery, indenture, apartheid, and separation from land. So when I speak of care for the earth, I'm speaking not only of carbon, policy, or temperature, but of a relationship of land, to memory, to grief, to dignity, to repair, and to belonging. Buddhism teaches us that nothing exists by itself alone. The term into being, coined by Thich Nhat Hanh, reminds us we are made of ancestors, communities, ecosystems, histories, and one another. And when we truly touch this through our practice, climate justice no longer becomes abstract. The suffering of children in flood zones, of communities facing famine here and abroad, of people living under war of occupation is not separate from us. This is the hardest teaching. We cannot separate ourselves from the suffering we witness. And our silence, consumption, and institutions, as articulated by Joe, can still sustain harm. And so interbeing and interconnection ask us to see we are already inside the crisis. And therefore, we have the possibility, both the possibility and the responsibility to act. And so for me, this is where Buddhism sustains hope, not as optimism, but as practice. Thich Nhat Hanh spoke about climate change 20 years ago, reminding us that engaged Buddhism means peace, practicing with peace and care for the earth, not just talking about it. It gives us ways in Buddhism to meet the despair without being consumed by it, to breathe, to pause, to see clearly, and to act without attachment to immediate results. So hope is cultivated through practice, relationship, and action. In Plum Village, we say peace in oneself, peace in the world. This does not mean waiting until we're perfectly peaceful before we act. It means walking, speaking, organizing, resisting, and serving in ways that do not reproduce the violence we are trying to transform. Non-harming is not the same as hardening, and that's why spaces of renewal matter. Plum Village has offered retreats for climate, regional retreats for climates from different faiths and none, regionally, locally, offering stillness, breath, presence, and another way of being in the work. Through Earth Care global groups, the teachings, the courses of Zen and the art of saving the planet, and retreats around the world with climate activists led by Christiana Figueres. It's helping create spaces where ecological grief, courage, and action can be held together. And this type of renewal changes not how we rest, but how we act in the world. And so for me, collectively, Plum Village and Buddhists have been involved in organizing and working in peace walks, interfaith vigils, relationship across faiths and traditions, spaces where healing, solidarity, and justice can meet. We see it in Uganda, where Bhante Buddha Rikita's Buddhist peace schools, and in India, where Jamse Gatsal show engaged Buddhism in education, meditation, peace, ethics, and earth care. So action is the small things, not only the big things that we get involved in, but the small acts that train our heart, smiling when I'm tired, choosing to listen before reacting, how we speak, consume, vote, invest, rest, repair. In Buddhist sense, these are not small acts. They are the seeds of the energy we want to cultivate in the world. So that's why Buddhists across traditions matters to me, because unity without uniformity is critical. And this year, the Vatican's Vesak's message invited Buddhists and Christians to become artisans of peace. Peace exists if we want it to dwell with us. And so for me, that means also becoming artisans of climate justice, of repairing relationship and cultivating the peace in ourselves, irrespective of our religious beliefs. So that's why perhaps gifts of Buddhism are not abstract. They are present in the capacity to stay present, to see interconnection, to act without hatred, to keep repairing relationships, and to work for the suffering of all. And when these gifts become action, hope is no longer an idea. It becomes love, clarity, and courage in motion. So for me, this is the Buddhist, especially in the Mahayana tradition that I come from, the Bodhisattva path, we call it, as Shantideva offers. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. And perhaps that is where the energy of Buddhism comes, because that is where the million acts of hope begin. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Rehena. Wonderful. We are now sort of rapidly running out of time, but I'd love to hear more from every speaker. Lucy Plummer now, I'm going to introduce. She's going to respond briefly to all of the speakers. She's a member of the SGI-UK, the Soka Gakkai International, community of Nichiren Daishonin Buddhism practitioners. She is also the SGI representative to the United Nations for Youth Engagement, and a consultant for the SGI Office for UN Affairs. She's a research fellow at the Centre for Applied Buddhism based at Taplow Court and a doctoral student of policy at the University of Bath, focusing on meaningful youth engagement policy for sustainable development. And she's also a trustee of Faith for the Climate. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you so much. I just want to take maybe a minute's time, but just really to thank the speakers for your contributions, and Olivia for moderating the session, and to everybody that's joined. Thank you so much for tuning in, for being here and spending your time. It's great to have such a multi-faith gathering. So what I just wanted to contribute, hopefully in a minute, is really in keeping with this theme of gifts, is a concept called the three treasures, which is a core Buddhist concept. And the three treasures are the Buddha, the law, or the Buddhist teaching, and the Buddhist order, so the community of believers. And in Sanskrit, the three treasures are known as Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So for me personally, the three treasures in my life are a great teacher, my mentor, a great teaching, and great friends. And it's really, as I was reflecting on, what to share today, I really felt that these three treasures in my life are the things that really form the core of my life and enable me to keep going when things feel so hopeless. So I just really wanted to invite all of us to reflect on the question, what are three treasures in your life? And how can we really deepen and strengthen an appreciation for these treasures in the month going forward? And please feel free to drop in the chat what the treasures are in your life that enable you to have hope and share that hope with others. So thank you so much. I'll pass back to Olivia.
Thank you, Lucy. That's a wonderful way of bringing it all together. Really fabulous. We have a tiny moment for Q&A. We wanted to have a little bit longer, but if anybody has an urgent question, please raise your hand or put it in the chat box. Would anybody like to contribute or say something? You're also very welcome just to make comments in the chat box as much as you want. Anything? I can't see any hands. Otherwise, I will hand over. I will just say thank you to all our wonderful speakers. And this recording will be available for people to hear. And I'm going to now hand over to Giles Goddard to wrap up our event today. So thank you, Giles. Over to you.
Thank you, Olivia, very, very much indeed. And thank you to all our speakers, and thank you to all who have been present on this webinar. As Shanon said at the start, we're trying in Faith, I should say I'm Giles Goddard, I'm the chair of Faith for the Climate, and I'm also vicar of St John's Church in Waterloo in London. And what we're trying to do and what we've been trying to do ever since we've formed Faith for the Climate, is to bring people in different faith traditions together who care deeply about our planet and who are working working for climate justice, working to resist the effects of climate change, or working to care for the nature of which we are all part. And it's been really, really good to hear from Buddhist traditions about the work that's been going on here and how profoundly we can support one another in our prayers, our meditations, in our actions. Especially, as Shanon said at the start, given the way in which the world is going in so many frightening directions. It's the resilience of community and relationships which I think will help us as we move forward. I'm going to read in a few moments a reflection from The Way of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva. But before I do, I just want to send out some festive greetings to our Jewish brothers and sisters who are keeping Shavuot on the 21st and 22nd of May, and to our Christian brothers and sisters who are keeping Pentecost on the 24th of May, to our Muslim brothers and sisters who are keeping Eid al-Adha on the 27th and 28th of May, and to our Buddhist brothers and sisters who are keeping Wesak on the 31st tomorrow. So lots of festivals for us to celebrate over the next few weeks. If you're not already signed up for our monthly newsletter, then please do so. It comes out next week and it will include lots of information about the Great Big Green Week. And we will be sending out the recording in a follow-up email today as well. So you'll be getting the recording in due course. So to finish, I just want to read an excerpt of a practice called the Bodhisattva, which I'm sure is more familiar to many of you than me, which is the thought of awakening. And this is by Shantideva, the 8th century Indian philosopher, Buddhist monk and poet, called The Way of the Bodhisattva. And it speaks right into the heart of our situation, I think. So let's keep a few moments of quiet before I read it. So may I become food and drink in the eons of famine for those poverty-stricken suffers. May I be a doctor, medicine and nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is cured. May I become never-ending, wish-fulfilling treasures materializing in front of each of them as all the enjoyments they need. May I be a guide for those who do not have a guide, a leader for those who journey, a boat for those who want to cross over, and all sorts of ships, bridges, beautiful parks for those who desire them, and light for those who need light. And may I become beds for those who need a rest, and a servant to all who need servants. May I become also the basic conditions for all sentient beings, such as earth or even the sky, which is indestructible. And may I always be the living conditions for all sentient beings until all sentient beings are enlightened. So thank you all very, very much for being with us, and we'll hope to see you at one of our events very soon. And peace be with you.
Thank you, everyone. Feel free to unmute and say goodbye so that we can all join in a chorus. A million wonderful greetings of peace.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
That was
Thank
lovely.
you.
Really
This is
good.
wonderful.